What happens when one of the biggest rock stars on the planet sits down on a daytime chat show, ready to talk, ready to laugh, ready to give the audience a good time, and the host decides that today is the day she is going to push every single button he has? It only took one comment. One single comment from Lorraine Kelly, delivered with a smile that did not reach her eyes, spoken in that bright, breezy tone she uses when she thinks she is being charming, to light the fuse on one of the most jaw-dropping moments in British daytime television history. And once that fuse was lit, there was no stopping what came next. The morning everything changed. The studio was warm, the kind of warm that makes everything feel safe and soft and easy. The kind of warm that makes people at home, sitting with their morning tea, you feel like they are right there in the room. The set of the Lorraine show was dressed the way it always is. Bright colors, comfortable sofas, a desk that is just there to look like a desk, flowers somewhere in the background, a studio audience packed with people who have waited weeks to be in that room. And sitting on that sofa, in a jacket that screamed everything loud and everything proud, was Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart. A man who has sold over 250 million records. A man who has been making music since before most people in that studio were born. A man who has played to crowds of hundreds of thousands of people and never once looked like he did not belong there. He was in a good mood. You could see it. He was leaning back, relaxed, one leg crossed over the other, grinning at the audience like he was at a party, and everyone there was his friend. The show began the way it always does. Music. A voiceover. Lorraine Kelly walking out to huge applause, smiling that big, wide smile of hers, waving at the audience like she is the queen arriving at a garden party. She sat down across from Rod, crossed her legs, tilted her head slightly the way she does when she's about to start an interview, and said in that bright, cheerful voice, "Rod, welcome back. We love having you here." Rod smiled. "Always good to be here, love. Always good." The audience clapped. Someone cheered from the back. Rod gave a little wave in their direction. Everything was fine. Everything was warm and easy and exactly what it should be. But then the panel joined them. The panel takes their seats. Sitting alongside Lorraine that morning were three of her regular contributors. There was Christine Lampard, who often stepped in to host when Lorraine was away, and who spoke in a calm, measured tone that made everything she said sound very reasonable. There was Dr. Hilary Jones, the resident doctor who had a habit of folding his hands together whenever he was about to say something he thought was important. And there was fashion and lifestyle commentator Karen Doyle, a woman who had been on the show so many times she had practically become part of the furniture. The four of them formed a kind of wall on that sofa, Lorraine at the center, the others around her, and Rod on the opposite seat, alone, facing all of them. Christine leaned forward and said warmly, "Rod, we were just talking before the show about how long you have been doing this. I mean, genuinely, is there ever a moment where you think, maybe I should slow down a little?" Rod laughed. A big, full laugh. "Slow down? Darling, I am going faster than ever. I have got a new album. I have got a tour coming. I have got more energy than most people half my age. Slowing down is not something I think about." The audience loved that. Another round of applause. Dr. Hilary unfolded his hands and said, "Well, that is great to hear, Rod. And it does show, you know. You look well." "Thank you, Hilary. I appreciate that." And then Lorraine smiled. That particular smile. The one that comes just before she says something she has clearly been planning to say for a while. The first jabs. "Now, Rod," Lorraine said. Her voice taking on that extra layer of brightness it gets when she is going somewhere tricky. "We have to talk about the new music. Because there are people, and I am not saying I am one of them, but there are people who wonder whether, at this stage, the world really needs another Rod Stewart album." The studio went just a little bit quieter. Rod blinked, He kept the smile on his face, but it shifted slightly. Just slightly. Well, he said, I think the people who buy it might disagree with those people. Of course, Lorraine said, waving her hand in a way that was supposed to look casual, but did not. But you know what I mean. You have had such an incredible career. Such a massive career. Some people would say the legacy is already there. Do you feel like you have anything left to prove? Rod tilted his head. I do not make music to prove anything to anyone. I make music because I love it. Because it is what I do. It is who I am. Karen Doyle nodded enthusiastically from the end of the sofa. And the fans clearly love it, Rod. The pre-orders for this album have been incredible, from what I have heard. That is very kind, Karen. Thank you, Rod said, and the warmth in his voice when he spoke to her was real and easy. But Lorraine was not finished. And what about the sound of it? She asked. Because I have to be honest with you, Rod, and you know I am always honest with my guests. Some of the tracks I have heard, I wondered whether you were maybe trying a little too hard to sound. I do not know current? Young? Is that a fair thing to say? Rod stared at her for a moment. Christine Lampard shifted in her seat. Dr. Hillary folded his hands together again. No, Rod said simply. No, that's not a fair thing to say, because it is not true. I am not trying to sound like anyone. I sound like myself. I have always sounded like myself. That is the whole point. Right, Lorraine said, nodding, her smile still firmly in place. I just think, and again, I might be wrong here, but I just think that audiences are very clever, and they can always tell when someone is, reaching a little bit. Lorraine. Rod said her name carefully, not angrily, not yet, but carefully. I've been making music for over 50 years. I have had #1 albums in more countries than I can count. I think if I were reaching, someone might have mentioned it by now. The audience laughed. Some of them clapped. Lorraine laughed too, but the laugh was thin. The temperature rises. They moved on, or they tried to. Lorraine steered the conversation toward Rod's personal life, which was always something the show liked to dig into. She asked about his family. He spoke warmly and at length about his children and how proud he was of every one of them. The audience melted a little. This was the Rod they wanted. Christine Lampard asked him about touring. Is it still as exciting as it was at the beginning? More exciting, Rod said, without hesitating, because now I know how to do it. When you are young, you are just hanging on for the ride. Now I am driving the thing. Christine smiled. I love that. Dr. Hillary leaned in. And health-wise, Rod, I have to ask, because our viewers do worry about their favorite artists. How are you looking after yourself on the road? That lifestyle can be, well, punishing. I sleep well. I eat well. I do not drink the way I used to, Rod said with a grin. And I do not do any of the other stuff I used to do either. The wild days are behind me. Now it is all about the music and the show. Good for you, Dr. Hillary said, genuinely. And then Lorraine said, but you know what? I think we should talk about the elephant in the room. Rod looked at her. The audience went quiet again. There has been a lot of talk, Lorraine continued, sitting straighter now, her voice taking on that particular edge it gets when she thinks she is conducting an important interview. About some of your comments recently, things you have said publicly, about other artists, about the music industry. Some people have found those comments a little, I do not know, out of touch. Rod put his hands on his knees. Which comments? Well, the ones about streaming, and about younger artists. You said some things that, Lorraine tilted her head to one side. Well, that raised a few eyebrows. Can you be specific? Rod asked. His voice was calm, measured, but there was something underneath it now. Well, I do not want to put words in your mouth, Lorraine said, which was interesting given that she had been putting things in his mouth for the past 20 minutes. But you suggested that a lot of modern music is, what was the word you used? Disposable? I said some of it is disposable, Rod said. Some of it. Not all of it. There is brilliant music being made right now. But yes, some of what is being churned out, I think it does not last. And I think the people making it know that too. I do not think that is a controversial opinion. But who are you to judge that? Lorraine said. The room went very still. Karen Doyle looked down at her hands. Christine Lampard looked at the floor. Dr. Hillary looked at the wall. Rod looked at Lorraine for a long moment. A very long moment. Then he said very quietly, I have been in this business for over 50 years, love. I think I have earned the right to have an opinion about it. But it comes across as a bit dismissive, does it not? Of younger artists who are working really hard, Lorraine pressed, leaning forward slightly. I was a younger artist once, Rod said, and people dismissed me too. That is part of the business. But I did not expect everyone to just nod along and tell me everything I did was brilliant. I had to earn it. And I think that standard should still exist. So you think the standard has dropped, Lorraine said, her eyebrows slightly raised. In some places, yes, I do, and I am allowed to think that. The panel cannot stay quiet. Lorraine turned to her panel with a look that said, back me up here. Karen Doyle spoke first, but she did not go the direction Lorraine wanted. I actually think Rod has a point, she said carefully. There is a difference between critique and dismissiveness. And everything I have heard from Rod has been critique. He has not personally attacked any specific artist. Lorraine blinked. That was not the response she was looking for. Dr. Hillary cleared his throat. I think what Karen is saying is that context matters a great deal. Rod did not say all young artists are untalented. He said some music feels disposable. That is actually a fairly common conversation in the industry. Lorraine turned back to Rod. She was recalibrating. You could see it. She had expected the panel to help her steer the conversation, and instead they had planted themselves firmly on the other side of the road. Christine, what do you think? Lorraine asked. Christine Lampard paused for just a moment before answering. I think Rod has always been incredibly outspoken, and that is part of what people love about him. He says what he thinks. Not many people do that anymore, especially in this industry. The audience responded to that warmly. Someone near the front started clapping, and others followed. Rod smiled at Christine and said, Thank you, love. Thank you. Lorraine held her smile in place, but it required effort now. She turned back to Rod and said very brightly, Okay, well, let us talk about something else then. Let us talk about the tour, because that is exciting news. Rod nodded. Yes, it is exciting. We are covering a lot of ground. The shows are going to be big. The production is the biggest I have ever put together, which is saying something. And ticket prices, Lorraine said, have caused quite a bit of conversation. Some fans have said they feel a little, I do not know, priced out. Rod looked at her steadily. The ticket prices are set by the promoters, not by me. That is not how it works. I do not sit in a room and decide what my fans should pay. I perform the show. The promoters handle the pricing. But you must have some say, Lorraine pressed. Surely at your level you can insist on certain things. I insist on giving the best show I possibly can, Rod said. That is what I insist on. I have been doing that for 50 years, and I will keep doing it until I cannot stand up anymore. That is a very safe answer, Lorraine said. Rod's jaw tightened. Just slightly. Just enough. Is it? He said. I thought it was an honest answer. I am sorry if that is not exciting enough for the show. Oh no, that is not what Lorraine started. It is fine, Lorraine, Rod said, and the way he said fine was not the way people say fine when things are fine. The comment that changed everything. There was a break, a short one, the kind of break that is supposed to let everyone breathe and reset, the kind of break that was supposed to smooth things over. When they came back from that break, Lorraine had a different look about her. It was the look of someone who had decided that this was her show and she was going to take it back. Right, she said, sitting forward. Before the break, we were talking about the music and the tour. But I want to go somewhere a little more personal, if that's okay, Rod. Go ahead, Rod said. He was still relaxed in his seat, but the relaxed was more careful now, more watchful. There have been a lot of stories over the years, Lorraine began, her voice taking on that soft, confiding tone she uses when she is about to say something she thinks will be taken as caring. About your relationships, your marriages, the lifestyle you lived. And I wonder, and I think our viewers wonder too, whether you look back at some of that and feel, I do not know, a little bit of regret, a little bit of embarrassment. Rod looked at her. He looked at her for a long time. I have got 8 children, he said, yet 8 children who I love more than anything in the world. I have a wife who I adore. I have a career that has given me everything. I look back and I see a full life, a big life. I do not see things I am embarrassed about. But surely, Lorraine said, not stopping, surely some of the things you did, some of the choices you made, you would do differently. Of course, everyone would do some things differently. That is called being human. But I am not going to sit here and perform regret for you if that is what you are asking. The audience shifted. You could feel it. I think it is a genuine question, Lorraine said, her voice taking on a slightly harder edge now. I think people look at you and they see someone who has had everything and done everything, and they wonder, whether all of it was all of it very kind? The pause that followed that question was enormous. Karen Doyle audibly breathed in. Dr. Hillary looked at the ceiling. Christine Lampard pressed her lips together, very tightly. And Rod Stewart leaned forward in his seat and said in a very clear, very quiet voice, "Did you just ask me if I was kind?" "Well, Lorraine started. "Because I think that is a rather personal thing to ask someone on morning television," Rod said. "I think that is a rather unusual question for a host to ask a guest. Is that really where we are going?" "I just think honesty is important," Lorraine said. "Honesty," Rod repeated. "Right. Okay, then let me be honest with you. I have come here to talk about music. I have come here because I respect the people watching this show. I have not come here to be put on trial for my personal life by someone who does not know me and who has read too many tabloids." The audience gasped. Then they burst into applause. Lorraine held her smile, but her eyes went very still. "Rod, I was not," she began. "I heard what you were doing," Rod said. Still calm, still measured. But there was a line now, a clear, bright line, and I think it is not a very kind thing to do to a guest. He let that land, and it landed hard. The panel fractures Lorraine looked at her panel again. This time, the look was more urgent. She needed someone to steer this back. Dr. Hillary spoke. "I think what Lorraine is trying to get at, Rod, is really just, how do you feel about your legacy? How do you feel about the way history will look at everything you have done? That is a positive question. Is it not?" Rod looked at Dr. Hillary and said very simply, "That is not what she asked, Hillary." Dr. Hillary did not have a response for that. Karen Doyle, to her credit, tried a different approach. "Rod, can I just ask, because I think the fans at home would love to know, what does a day in the life look like for you right now? When you are not on tour, when you are not recording, what does a normal day look like?" Rod looked at Karen, and some of the tension left his shoulders. "I walk the dogs," he said. "I play with my youngest. I cook. I paint. Actually, I paint model trains, which a lot of people do not know about me. I am a collector. Have been for years." "Model trains?" Karen said, genuinely delighted. "Tell me more about that." "I have a whole room," Rod said, and the grin was back. "A whole room dedicated to it. the tracks, on the scenery, everything. I have been working on one layout for over 20 years. It is not finished. 20 years? Karen laughed. It is very detailed, Rod said seriously. And then he laughed too. The audience was delighted. This was the Rod they knew. This was the Rod they loved. Warm and funny and full of life. But Lorraine was not done. That is lovely, she said, and her voice had a slightly strained brightness to it. But I do want to go back, just briefly, to what we were talking about before, because I think it is important. Lorraine, Christine Lampard said, very gently, but very clearly. Lorraine looked at her. I think Rod has been very gracious with his time today, and he has answered everything fully, Christine said, still gentle, still clear. Maybe we should. And she left the rest of the sentence hanging just long enough for everyone in the room to understand what she meant. Lorraine held Christine's gaze for exactly 2 seconds. Then she turned back to Rod with a smile that had gone tight at the edges. I just think, Lorraine said, and I want to be clear that this comes from a place of genuine affection for you, Rod, because we have known each other for a long time. I just think that the public, when they see you, they want the real you, the vulnerable you. And I wonder if sometimes you hide behind the bravado. Rod put both feet flat on the floor. He sat up straight, and he looked at Lorraine Kelly with the kind of look that is very still and very direct and carries a great deal of weight. The vulnerable me, he said. Yes, Lorraine nodded. I had cancer. Lorraine, Rod said, very quietly. I told the world I had cancer. I talked about it openly. I stood in front of huge crowds while I was sick, and I still performed. I do not think I hide behind bravado. I think I get on with it. And I think there is a difference. Nobody said a word. The moment of no return. Lorraine recovered. She always does. It is one of the things she is good at. She nodded slowly and said, Of course. And you were incredibly brave about that, Rod. And I think, Lorraine, Rod's voice was different now. Not raised, not sharp, but different. Can I ask you something? Of course, she said. What is it you actually want from me today? Because I have been sitting here for a while now, and I am not entirely sure what it is you are looking for. Is it an apology? Because I do not have one to give you. Is it a scandal? Because there is not one. Is it, he gestured broadly with his hands, is it just something to fill the time? Lorraine opened her mouth. Because I want to talk about the music, Rod continued. That is why I am here. The album is the best thing I have done in years, and I am proud of it. And I think it deserves better than this. Lorraine started. I absolutely want to talk about the music. That is, then let us talk about the music, Rod said. There was a pause. A genuine, awkward, ticking pause that seemed to last much longer than it actually did. And then Lorraine did the thing that broke it. She laughed. A little, high, thin laugh. And she said, You know what, Rod? I have to say, you are very good at controlling an interview. I am not trying to control anything, Rod said. And there was something in his voice now that was final, a finality to it. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation, which I thought was your specialty. Lorraine's smile stayed in place, but it had moved past strained and arrived somewhere else entirely. I do not think we are going to agree on everything today, she said. No, Rod said. I do not think we are. But that is okay, is it not? She said. That is what good television is. I think good television, Rod said slowly, as if he was choosing each word with great care, is when a host respects the person they have invited into their living room. And I am not sure that has been the case today. Lorraine stared at him. The studio audience went completely quiet. And then Karen Doyle said, very softly, Rod, for what it is worth, I think you have been incredibly dignified today. Rod turned to her and nodded. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that very much. The exit Lorraine tried one more time to pull things back together. She spoke about the tour dates. She mentioned a song title. She asked if he would be performing on the show. Rod answered the questions, but the warmth was different now. Contained. Polite, but not soft. The way a person talks when they have already made up their mind about something. I am going to perform at the end of the show, yes, he said. That was the arrangement. Wonderful, Lorraine said. We cannot wait. Good, Rod said. The conversation moved on, but it moved on in the way that a car moves on after one of its wheels has fallen off. Technically still in motion, but everyone inside knows something is wrong. Dr. Hillary tried to bring the mood up by talking about Rod's health journey and how inspiring it had been. Rod thanked him genuinely and spoke briefly about how life looks different after a health scare. How you stop worrying about the small stuff. The small stuff, Christine Lampard said with a small smile. I think a lot of us could learn from that. You learn very quickly what matters, Rod said, and it is not interviews on morning television. It got a laugh from the audience. It also landed exactly where it was meant to land. Lorraine laughed along. She had to, but her laugh was 2 beats late. You are a piece of work, Rod Stewart. I will give you that, she said. I have been called worse, he said, but the way he said it was not playful. Not really. Then came the moment. The one everyone in the studio had been feeling building for the past several minutes. The kind of moment that has a physical weight to it. The kind of moment where the air in the room actually changes. Lorraine leaned forward one final time and said, with that bright smile, with that cheerful, unshakable brightness that had been the weapon of the whole interview. Rod, be honest with me. Do you actually enjoy doing press anymore? Or does it feel like an obligation? Like something you do because you have to? Rod looked at her. Then he looked at the audience. Then he looked back at Lorraine. I enjoy press when I feel respected, he said. And I think, honestly, I think I am going to go and get ready for the performance now. I think I have said everything I need to say here. He stood up. Just like that. He stood up. In straight and tall and unhurried, he smoothed the front of his jacket. He looked at Karen Doyle and said, Karen, lovely to see you. He looked at Christine and nodded. He looked at Dr. Hillary and said, Hillary, good to see you as always. And then he looked at Lorraine. He did not say anything for a moment. He just looked at her. And then he said, Thanks for having me, Lorraine. Not warmly, not coldly, just plainly. The way you say something when you have decided that plain is the only way to say it. And he walked off the set. The audience, for one full second, did not make a sound. And then someone started clapping. And then another person. And then more. And then a whole section of the audience was applauding a man who had just walked out the door. Lorraine sat in her seat. The smile was still there. Technically. But it had stopped being a real thing and started being a shape that her face was making out of habit. Well, she said to the camera with a brightness that wobbled just slightly at the edges. Rod Stewart, everybody. The panel sat in silence for a moment. Karen Doyle looked at the door he had walked through. Dr. Hillary folded his hands. Christine Lampard looked at Lorraine with an expression that was professional and unreadable, and said very calmly, powerful interview. What the room felt. There is something that happens in a television studio when something real has just occurred. Something that was not scripted and was not planned, and was not the careful, managed version of reality that television usually delivers. The air is different. The people in it are different. The audience members look at each other sideways, not to confirm what they saw, because they all saw it, but to confirm that it was real, that it actually happened, that they were not imagining it. That is what happened in the studio that morning. Rod Stewart had walked in as a guest. He had sat down as a professional. He had talked about his music and his life and his family and his model trains. He had been funny and warm and real. And when he had been pushed, and pushed again, and pushed in a way that stopped being professional and started being something else, he had not shouted. He had not stormed. He had not thrown anything or said anything truly ugly. He had simply decided he was done. And he had stood up. And he had walked out. With his jacket straight and his head up and his dignity completely intact. And the audience had clapped for him, not for the drama. Not because they wanted to see a fight, because they had watched a man sit there and be poked and prodded and questioned and diminished, and they had watched him hold his ground without losing himself. And that is something people respond to, even when they do not have words for it. Lorraine sat in the chair that was her chair in the room that was her room, on the show that carried her name, and she was still smiling, and the smile was still perfectly in place, and none of it felt like a victory. Because you can be the host of a show and still lose the room. You can have your name above the door and still be the person the audience does not choose. You can be in charge of the interview and still be the one everyone feels sorry for at the end. Lorraine went to an ad break. The team on the floor moved around adjusting things. The panel spoke quietly among themselves, and somewhere backstage, Rod Stewart was getting ready to perform. The performance that said everything. They always do a performance at the end of the Lorraine show when a musician is on. It is the part of the show that the audience often enjoys most. The part that is just music and nothing else. No questions, no clever angles, no hidden agenda. Rod had agreed to do it, and he kept that agreement. That is the detail that matters. He had every reason to leave entirely. He had every justification. He had been questioned and challenged and subtly belittled for most of an hour, and he would have been understood if he had simply gone home. But he did not. He went backstage and he got himself ready, and he came back out, and he stood in front of that studio audience, and he sang. And the audience went absolutely wild for him. The applause before he had even sung a single note was enormous. It was the kind of applause that carries something in it. The kind of applause that is not just about the music, but about the moment. About what they had all just witnessed, and what they felt about it. Rod looked out at them and grinned that grin of his. The big, wide, genuine grin. The one that makes his whole face change. "Thank you," he said. And it was simple, and it was real, and it was everything that the previous hour had not been. Lorraine watched from her seat, with her panel beside her, with her smile on her face, and the whole room was for Rod. Karen Doyle, watching from the sofa, was clapping. Dr. Hillary was clapping. Christine Lampard was clapping, and she was not trying to hide the fact that she was enjoying it. And Lorraine clapped too. She clapped with her hands held high, and her smile working as hard as it had ever worked. But some rooms, once they have chosen a side, do not unchoose it. Some moments have already decided what they are going to mean. And this moment had already decided. Rod Stewart sang. He sang the way he has always sung. Loud and real and with everything he has. Like a man who does not do it because he has to. Like a man who does it because there is genuinely nothing else on the planet he would rather be doing. When the song ended, the studio erupted. Really erupted. The kind of noise that makes the walls feel like they are closer together than they were before. Rod took a bow. He pointed at the audience. He blew a kiss in the general direction of the room. And then he looked once, briefly, at the sofa, at Lorraine, at the panel, at all of it. And that look said more than any interview had. What we learned. There is a way that some television hosts talk to their guests. A way that is dressed up in warmth and brightness and the language of honesty, but underneath it is something else entirely. Something that is about control, about making sure that no matter who walks through that door, the host remains the most important thing in the room. And most of the time, guests go along with it. Because they have an album to sell. Because they have a tour coming. Because they do not want the trouble. Because it is easier to just smile and nod and give the host what they want and walk away and forget about it. Rod Stewart did not do that. He sat there. He listened. He answered honestly and openly. He was funny and warm and real. He pushed back when he was pushed. He drew a line when a line needed to be drawn. He stood up when he had said everything he needed to say. And then he came back and he performed. Because he had made a commitment to the people watching at home, and he was not going to break that commitment just because the conversation had gone somewhere uncomfortable. That is what a career of 50 years looks like from the inside. Not a man who needs a television show to validate him. Not a man who needs a host to like him. Not a man who is afraid of silence or awkwardness or an audience that watches to see what happens next. A man who knows exactly who he is, who has known it for a very long time, and who is not going to pretend otherwise for anyone. Not even for a host with a bright smile and a set full of flowers and a room full of people watching. Lorraine Kelly asked Rod Stewart if he was kind. He told her he did not need to perform regret for her. He said that respect matters in an interview. He stood up and he walked out and he sang for the audience who came to see him. And the audience chose him. Every single time they had a chance to choose, they chose him. That is not nothing. In a television studio, with the cameras running and the lights up and everything that is said being seen by everyone, that is actually everything. Rod Stewart has been in this business since before most of the people reading about this moment were born. He has been told he is too old and too loud and too much and not enough and past it and out of touch and all of the things that people say about people who refuse to sit quietly and wait to be forgotten. And he keeps going. Album after album, tour after tour, show after show, not because he has something to prove, because he loves it, because it is who he is. Because when the music starts and the audience is there and the lights are up, none of the other stuff matters at all. And no morning television host, no matter how bright the smile, is going to take that from him.